The Blood Surge Necromancer is unfortunately overshadowed by the Pure Summon build, but that doesn't mean it's not still viable or fun. Let's talk about it. For the skills on this one, I like to start with Hemorrhage because it's ranged, but you also generate Fortify with it every time you use it, so this is super important. On the next tab, obviously we max out Blood Surge because that's the main skill that we're going to be using, and the rune that we go for with this one is Paranormal. Paranormal actually gives you a free overpower every like 5 stacks when you're casting it while healthy. And then for the passives, Hewed Flesh creates a corpse for you on a random chance, and then you get 1 point into Unliving so that you can get 3 in Imperfectly Balanced. Imperfectly Balanced just makes your skills cost more, but they deal more damage, so it is worth it in the end. On the next tree, all we have is 1 point into Blood Mist. This is your escape. I love this ability because you can either reposition yourself or it'll help you clump up a bunch of mobs so that you can Blood Surge all of them in the nuts. And then the passives, you have 1 into Harvest, but then you have 3 into Fueled by Death because every time you use Corpse Tendrils, which we'll talk about in just a second, you gain a bunch of extra damage for 6 seconds. On the next tree, you have Death's Embrace. This is going to cause close enemies to deal less damage from you, but take more damage from you. You go Death's Advance because the Necromancer desperately needs the movement speed, and then Amplify Damage makes it so anything that you curse takes extra damage for you. Speaking of curses, the one we use is obviously Decrepify because it's going to slow them down and make them deal less damage, but then you go Aberrant, which is such a weird word in the English dictionary, but you go this one because it has a chance to reduce the cooldowns on your things like Corpse Tendrils or your ultimate. Corpse Tendrils with the rune of Plagued, this is going to give you vulnerable every time you use Corpse Tendrils on anything that it hits. And then there's a handful of passives here that benefit your blood stuff. So 1, you just go Mending. This one is just to unlock the next couple. And we have 3 into Coalesced Blood because generally speaking, this build is very tanky. You have, you're healthy at all times, so you're going to deal that 18% increased damage pretty much at all times. We only have 2 into Drain Vitality because we needed that extra point elsewhere, but this gives us a lucky hit chance to Fortify, which is awesome. Overpower is based on your life and your Fortify and a couple other modifiers for it, so that's important. And speaking of that, your blood skills will also deal, you have 3 points into this by the way, your blood skills will deal extra overpower damage, and it's doubled when you're healthy. In the next tab, because we're sacrificing all of our minions, and I'll show you which ones we're supposed to sacrifice, we use 3 into Standalone for the increased damage reduction, and then we have 3 into Memento Mori because that increases the Skeletal Mage and Warrior sacrifice bonuses that you gain. The other passive in this tree is we have 3 into Inspiring Leader, and while this does make sense on minions, it also makes sense without them because again, you're healthy all the time, so you get that bonus critical strike chance. And for the ultimate, we're using Bone Storm because Bone Storm, it's both offensive and defensive. You can use this more defensively if you really need to. It's going to give you damage reduction, obviously, but the thing that it adds is critical strike chance. And then on the topic of overpower, which we were talking about earlier, Rathma's Vigor is going to give us another tick of overpower every 12 seconds as long as we remain healthy. So as you can imagine, it's very important that you stay at high life with this build. Now for the aspects on this one, the main one that you want to use is Bloodbathe because that's going to double cast your Blood Surge. Another one that we use is Rathma's Chosen because every time you overpower an ability, you get an attack speed buff, and this is great for spamming your Blood Novas. And then another really big one is Grasping Veins because it gives you a huge critical strike chance buff every time you use it, but it gives you a constant crit damage buff to anything that's affected by Corpse Tendrils. And then for the final offensive one, we do use Edge Masters. That one's just, it's a standard for a lot of builds. It increases your damage based on how much resource you have remaining in your pool. And then for the defensives, Hardened Bones is one that's going to give you a % damage reduction, and this one's very large. And then if you're like me and you are using Hemorrhage, then Might is a good one because every time you use it, you get even more damage reduction. So you end up, I think just between these two, you can get between 40 and 50% damage reduction just right there. Now the stats in Season 4 are a little bit different. They've kind of simplified a lot of things to make it a lot more understandable to the general public. And for this build in particular, it's kind of interesting because you actually stack Life and Fortify generation because these add to your overpower damage. And because this build has so much overpower damage and overpower generation, this is the biggest deal for your offensive stats, which is kind of crazy. And then a couple of the other stats is you really want attack speed so you can spam cast a lot faster, and then critical strike bonuses, so where that's chance and or damage. And then the defensives on this one, just like everything else, it's damage reduction, armor, and all resistances, and I don't have to say life because that's actually one of our offensive stats. Now for the Paragon board on this one, I know Paragon stuff in general is kind of daunting. I like to use resources like Maxroll, and that's where I'm pulling a lot of the info from here. And what they have on their board is Amplify, because this is going to give you innate bonus damage regardless, and then it's going to increase the damage you do to cursed targets. After that, we have the Bloodbath board, and the glyph we go for on the Bloodbath board, which is going to give us increased overpower damage, is Sacrificial. Sacrificial is going to increase our damage while fortified and increase the healing that we receive, but the other part of this is that you deal bonus damage by, I think it's 10% when you don't have any minions out on the field. To the right of that, we have Flesh Eater, which is going to give us increased damage every time we consume X amount of corpses, and then the glyph that I said wrong last time and got corrected on in the comments is corporeal, not corporeal, and this gives us a myriad of benefits, including damage to elites, all resistance, and then a flat damage increase of 10%. North of that, we have the Scent of Death board, and this one gives you, if you have corpses nearby, you gain damage reduction, and if there are no corpses nearby, you do bonus damage, so that's pretty neat. And then the glyph on this one is Exploit, which is, of course, just the additional vulnerable damage. And again, we have vulnerable almost all the time because of corpse tendrils. Back near the start to the left of Bloodbath, we have the Triple B board over here, and the glyph that we have in this one is Control. Control gives us bonus damage to crowd-controlled enemies, which become crowd-controlled whenever you use corpse tendrils, believe it or not. It's kind of a big part of this whole build. And then to the north, who don't remember, we have the Bone Graft board. We don't go Bone Graft, but we do use the Essence glyph, and that's going to give us bonus critical strike damage. Now, finally, the last board is Wither, and the glyph that we have here is Dominate, and Dominate's going to give us more overpower damage. Now, as usual, when it comes to the Paragon board, you can build this however you want. I normally actually tailor these to my own experience. So, like, I spend 30 to 40 points on my own regards, and just whether I need more defensives or if I need more offensives, it just depends. So for me, it's a case-by-case basis. You can use whatever the hell you want to use. This is just what I used here to showcase this build. So for the endgame stuff on this build, Sacrilegious Soul is a ring that automatically uses some of your corpse skills, which is kind of amazing. And then the Blood Moon Pants give you bonus overpower damage to cursed mobs. There's another thing that this does where your minions have a chance to cast your curse, but since you sacrifice everybody, that doesn't matter. But yeah, so for the playstyle section of this one, this is actually pretty interesting and fun. It's a little bit different. A couple things that you can do is you can either Nova everything for the rest of your life and just kind of play really chill and laid back if you wanted to, or if you wanted to go try hard, you can use corpse tendrils to bunch everything up, then curse them, and then lay down the long arm of the goddamn law with your blood surges that are now overpowered, have huge crit chance and huge crit damage, and you'll see numbers in like the upper realm of being unoptimized. I think I was hitting in like the 500,000s on double casts, which is insane. Like, I literally one-shot a boss with one of these on accident because like all the stars aligned, which was just bananas. Bone Storm is the ultimate, of course, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, but you can use this defensively or offensively or both. I normally just save it for bosses because you get the damage reduction for it, but I really enjoy that crit chance. It helps a lot. And then Blood Mist obviously is they call it a get out of jail free card. For me, I played WoW for like 20 whatever years. It's cheat death essentially, but not because you have to actually use it. So maybe it is a get out of jail free card, but either way, Blood Mist is pretty cool. I use that so you don't ever die. And it's also really good for repositioning everybody. Now, objectively speaking, this build is actually super fast for AoE, and it's extremely tanky due to all the life that we use for overpower. In terms of bosses, it's not as fast as it is in the AoE regard, but it's still just fine. There's no issues with it at all. I put it up on the Pit Clapometer, and it actually scored a blood-blistering 4 minutes and 30 seconds, tying it exactly with the unoptimized Summon Necromancer. Now, in my personal opinion, don't get me wrong, I love Blood Surge. What I don't love is the pure Blood Surge where you sacrifice all your minions. My favorite version of Necromancer, which I'll likely end up playing this season at some point, is a almost full summon, but tailored into using Blood Surge, because I think it's one of my favorite Necro skills, I think in the whole game, to be honest. But either way, I'm a huge fan of Necromancer builds. This one specifically, I'll probably rate this at a 6 out of 10. Don't hate me. So do me a favor, let me know in the comments down below what you're playing this season and what your thoughts are on the pure Blood Surge build. And on the way down there, maybe like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, because they're free and they really help out the channel here. And now, if you want to, I do stream like once or twice a week right now. My stream schedule might increase a little bit here for the next couple of weeks. And what we like to do is we'll do community events. We might hold giveaways and things like that. The best way to stay tuned in to whatever I'm doing is join our Discord and check out the announcements page there. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. And if you're bored, YouTube is going to recommend this next one for you. Happy grinding, travelers, and we'll see you in Sanctuary.